I'll be talking to Jared Bernstein from the White House economic staff. Jared, welcome to Native News Online, and tell us about what's happening with the economy now, just moments before the election, basically.
Right. Well, as a member of the White House economics team, that's a pretty spot-on question for me, because my job is to think about the economy and to advise President Biden. We have across this nation one of the strongest labor markets we've had in our history. The unemployment rate has been well below 4% nationally for a while, over 10 million jobs created. And I think importantly, we try to drill down and see how people are doing in different communities. We've seen real advances for racial minorities, for Latinos, Hispanics, for folks across the board. And when you have such a strong, kind of welcoming job market, it usually means that workers have a bit more bargaining power. They can push for better quality jobs. We've also worked very hard to try to bring down prices at the pump. And we've had some success there. I think we have to keep pushing, but at least nationally, we have a price of gas per gallon that's $1.20 below where it was when it peaked out above $5 in mid-August. So that's, as President Biden says, a little more breathing room for people at the pump. And that's the kind of work we just need to keep doing. Maintain those strong gains we've seen in the job market while easing the price pressures that so many Americans are dealing with.
Well, thank you for that, Jared. And I was a little disturbed myself last week when I looked at some of the record profits the oil companies are doing on the backs of Americans. And of course, so many people want to blame it on the president, what's happening with inflation. But what's your comments? What can be done to help curtail or stop the oil companies from taking so much money from the American public?
Well, this is exactly where the president is. You and he share that sentiment, as do so many millions of Americans, which is that we very much need these companies to continue to produce. In fact, we've urged them to kick up their production. So instead of sending back dividend checks and doing share buybacks to boost the stock price of their companies, what we'd really like to see them do is invest in more production and more output. That's especially important since we saw OPEC Plus, the global energy cartel, decide to cut back their production recently, last month or so. That's an action that supports Putin in his war against Russia. So exactly the wrong policy, both for global economics and for geopolitics. So the fact that the president is up there saying to the oil companies, look, either you start to give people a little bit more breathing room at the pump, very much consistent with what he's trying to do, or he said, I'm close to quoting him, I will work with Congress to try to make sure that happens. So it's very important that these companies step up and do the right thing, as you've suggested.
Yes, and go back to the jobs. I know last week I also saw there Native Americans have the lowest unemployment rate in its history, and I noticed that. Tell us about some of the projects or the program that has implemented since he's been president that helped us get to where we are.
Yeah, so there are three big legislative measures that President Biden helped to get over the goal line: the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the CHIPS Act. The latter is about standing up, finally, really, a domestic semiconductor industry in this country. The first one, the Inflation Reduction Act, lowers the cost of healthcare, lowers the cost of prescription drugs, lowers the cost of clean energy, and has some really deep incentives to build electric vehicles and clean energy components here in this country. I think the infrastructure law is particularly relevant to Native American communities because for years we've just disinvested. We failed to invest in our public goods, which have everything to do with roads, bridges, water systems, the kind of things that many people in rural America and in Native American communities are really important. And so this is a real value of ours, that this president was finally able to get that legislation over the goal line. And there are literally thousands of projects in the field already trying to reverse those decades of disinvestment.
Yes. Then one last question is kind of the hard question. I don't know if you have a crystal ball or not.
I do, but it's got a crack in it.
Will there be a recession next year?
So we think that the economy has strong momentum in the following sense. The unemployment rate nationally well below 4%, close to a 50-year low. Job creation, 260,000 jobs last month, over 10 million since this president got here. To some extent, that's a forward motion machine. It's just going to generate more paychecks, more consumer spending, more demand. That keeps the economy going. Look, on the other hand, we have global uncertainty. We have a Federal Reserve that is hiking interest rates very quickly, doing their part. It's not a critique, doing their part to help bring down inflation. So there are cross currents. And I got to tell you, you mentioned crystal ball. I don't think anybody's crystal ball can go out that many months and tell you where things are going to be. But what I can tell you is that where we are is very much non-recessionary. I mean, none of the numbers that I've cited to you, including our most recent GDP growth rate of well over 2%, suggest recession. So the question is that momentum likely to stick? And I think barring negative shocks, we have a decent chance of keeping that momentum going, maintaining the gains that we've made while reducing price pressures.
Well, thank you, Jared, very much for being with us today, and hope you come back and visit Native News Online again and to inform Indian country what's going on from the White House.
Well, that would be my pleasure. So I'll see you next time.
Thank you.